What is up? Holy cow. I've said it from the very first week all the way up until now. I'll probably have to say it all the way until the end of the College World Series. But the Big 12 this year is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated conferences out there. I mean, you look at what happened this past week, besides the obvious, you look at what happened and what these teams are doing, how they played all year long leading up to the season finale this past year. It's crazy. So, I don't know if you guys know this, but I really love softball. And this past weekend, I got to experience just a fantastic series. It was Bedlam. It lived up to the hype of everything that it always is, and then more. You had good evening. You had teams that battled it out, but for Bedlam especially, it is the last conference matchup series. And so they've talked about playing again Oklahoma and Oklahoma State in regular season, maybe whenever they're not conference foes, but this is the last time they met up as conference foes. In Oklahoma State, I've been saying they are so tough. They are such a tough team. They came out and just let their presence be known in Love's Stadium at the field. They showed out. They absolutely I feel like I need to lead with this because if I don't, I'll probably burst. But being able to come out at OU and not just win, but win handily and then come back the next day and not just win handily again. I think that is why we're going to talk about the rankings later, but I think that's why Oklahoma State they're a little bit higher up. But let me just take you back to what happened around the weekend. Then I'll tell you about my past weekend. And then this upcoming week, there's a lot going on. We need to break down the teams. We need to break down the matchups. We need to break down, holy cow, postseason is going to start on Sunday. What does that look like? So, all that and more, we're going to go ahead and get started. But I'm your host, Nicole Mendes with 10 Teams, 2 Rings. I talk about the Big 12. I talk about the Big 12 and just how great they have been on the Softball America Network. So you can find us on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. I think last time we checked, we were maybe 3 or 4 people away from 1,000 subscribers. Once we hit 1,000, we'll pick a random subscriber and they can pick as athlete's shirt of their choice. So, we hit a 1K this morning, but keep subscribing, keep liking. So let's just go back around the horn about what happened this weekend. So BYU was at Kansas. They swept 3-0. Or they swept all 3 games. You had Baylor at the university, or Baylor at home against the University of Houston. They won. They swept 3-0. UCF was at Iowa State. They won 2 out of the 3. Iowa State still won. Texas at Texas Tech. They won and they swept them all 3-0. Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. Oklahoma State took the series 2-1. Let's just go line by line. BYU at Kansas. I think BYU, they've scraped and clawed their way into earning respect from a lot of people around the country who you look at it and you say like, "Oh, like it's their first time in the conference, like we're not sure if they're going to compete." They have definitely earned the respect or they should have earned the respect of a lot of people. And just like you said, poor Kansas playing themselves out of the tournament. That's one of the comments that somebody made, but it's so true. Kansas, they're a really good team. They have 2 solid arms. They have some good hitting. They just haven't been able to make it timely, but that doesn't discount from the fact that they are a good team. So for BYU to go in and get a complete sweep at home at Kansas's home when they've been doing so well at home, that's very, very impressive as they head into this Big 12 tournament, as they start to head into conference play. And then Baylor against U of H, 3-0. They have been on a tear. I think Texas is the most impressive that we've seen consistently throughout the conference, but I don't want to say consistently, but Baylor has the best comeback kid type of story because we weren't sure what was going on. Going into this conference season, I thought for sure Baylor was going to be in the mix. And then all of a sudden I look up and they're like 0-8. And I'm like, what happened? They played so well in preseason. What's going on? Um, and it was just a little bit of a disappointing start, and it hurt them in the end, but they besides Texas, they have been on the longest win streak. They've been on a complete tear. And whenever you have a team like that, that's on a tear and it's just clicking on all cylinders, they get dangerous. So as we get into postseason, everybody who's ever played or everybody who's a softball fan that watches, it does not matter what your record was coming up until this point. Yes, we have to get through this Big 12 conference and we are going to talk about it. But right now, just talking a little bit about Baylor and what they might look like throughout this tournament and throughout postseason, they're getting hot at the right time. Their things are getting caught up. They're putting put in sync at the right time for them to make a really good postseason run. UCF at Iowa State. UCF took two, won the series. That's another team that is not ranked in the top 25. But for me, if I'm a team and I'm watching selection show on Sunday, I'm going, man, I don't want UCF to come here. The games that they have played, even though they might have lost, the games that they have played in the Big 12, especially against these top teams, have been very competitive, very tight. They've been neck and neck. They compete, and these are the top four teams, three of the top four teams in the country. And then you have Baylor, who once they get together, I mean, at one point, they were ranked in the top 10. So it's a very, very elite squad of conference teams that they're playing against. Um, and they don't necessarily have the rankings to reflect that, but they're going to be a dangerous team in the postseason as well. Um, Texas at Tech. Can we talk about the amount of runs that Texas scored at Texas Tech? I think one of the games was like 23-0. It was nuts. I'm going to like read it off because they won the first game 13-3 in 5 innings. Then the second game against Texas Tech, they won 23-0 in 5 innings. And then the last game, they won 14-4. Like, that's insane. The numbers that they are putting up. And that's not just normal numbers. That is just explosion of offense. Reese Atwood definitely leading the way for her team offensively. She kind of went through a rut mid. I don't even want to call it a slump because it wasn't. She just wasn't quite as explosive as she was in preseason. Whatever it was, she figured it out and then some this past weekend. She looks so, so, so good. And then Oklahoma State at OU. I talked about it all year long. Oklahoma State, they are a very scrappy team. They have had those games where it is tight and their backs are up against a wall and they have to figure out a way. They have to be tough. One moment of weakness and the game is lost, and they have figured out time and time again all season long how do we come out with the win? How do we come out and be able to score? How do we come out and be able to shut down an offense, to shut down a pitcher? How do you play suffocating? And LJ commented and said NCAA Player of the Year has to be Reese Atwood. I'm going to talk about that, but she has been like so, so good. I think if I got a vote, I don't get a vote, but if I did, I think she would be in my final three for sure, if not the top. She has just done such a great job. And I think sometimes whenever you vote for Player of the Year, you see the impact as far as like production. Um, but I think also what Reese Atwood has for her team is she's very much leading physically with what she's doing, but also having a teammate who can lead their team with a mentality is so big. And I just get the feeling that mental side of Texas is being led that way. I think so. Um, and then we have Oklahoma, the last of those teams in the top four. So you have Texas ranked one, Oklahoma State three, and then Oklahoma ranked at four. The only one in between those Big 12 teams is Tennessee ranked at two. Oklahoma, they figured it out on Sunday, but they did not look like they had an offense Friday and Saturday. It was very shaky, and it just looked like they were halfway committing to plans. It didn't look like they were well prepared. Um, and props to Oklahoma State because they looked like they were well prepared whenever it came to offense. And I think now that everybody's seen each other, now the conference is over, whenever you go into this conference tournament, it's very much, "Oh, what is she?" There's no element of surprise. I haven't seen her before. I don't know what they do. Everybody kinda knows what everybody does. Now it's who can make the best game plan and then apply it, because if you don't have a good game plan, you're gonna be guessing the whole time, whether you're a pitcher, whether you're a hitter, whether you're a defense, where do I set up? But if you don't know how to translate it and apply it, that doesn't really help as well. So LJ getting a little fired up, saying, "No way you can give to Spade over Atwood." We were talking about how Spade, she's chasing that home run record. I don't know. I mean, there is something to be said for somebody who's chasing the home run record. Atwood maybe having a great year, but so is Spade. So ultimately, I think it comes down to what is this postseason run look like? What does a conference run look like? What does regionals run look like? What is supers? And as they make their way into the World Series time, if their team gets to continue, what does that look like? Because somebody mentioned that maybe the conference that Spade's in isn't as big. I would argue that they're still very good. I do think Big 12 is better, but the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how big or small, how good or bad your conference is. Whenever you get into postseason and you're facing up those top teams, if you produce, you produce. So that's what it all comes down to. And I think this postseason will kind of determine those four front runners for player of the year, not just player of the year, but freshman of the year as well. Um, which I think Oklahoma had 5 nominated into the top 26 as finalists. Oklahoma State had 1. Obviously, Reese Atwood is just incredible. But Oklahoma State, they had Lexi Kilfoyle nominated for Player of the Year. She's one of the top 26 finalists. She's legit. But one thing before I get too much um, ahead of myself into the rankings, I do want to talk about this special moment that I saw this weekend that I was just completely blown away. So on Sunday, I took over for Softball America and I did a social media takeover. And I was kind of walking around, walking the field, and I'm out in left field. And I'm like, I gotta make my way around. Haven't been out to center field yet. Made my way to center field. I was like, haven't been out to right field yet. Gotta make my way over there. And that is where the opposing team's fans are. So I make my way over to all the Oklahoma State fans. And I'm like, who belongs to who? Like, who's your kid? Who's your family? Who's your friend? Are you just a fan? And I got to talking. There's one thing about me. I can jibber jabber. I got to talking to Ivy Rosenberry's mom, and we were talking as she got taken out of the game. And there was this moment where she walked into the bullpen, and her eyes, you're kind of down at left field, and her eyes just looked up and saw her mom, and you could just see the tears form in her eyes. And she said, I needed 4.1 innings. And they had like such a special moment, and she walks away and I'm talking to her mom. She goes, going into this weekend, Ivy needed 4.1 innings to reach that 100 inning mark to be able to be considered for an All-American. And she got it on that Sunday, even though she was battling a lot of stuff, even though that she had pitched several innings before, had a great outing on Saturday. Again, another great outing on a great outing on Saturday, had another great outing on Sunday. but for her to be able to get in and get those last couple of innings to be able to be eligible literally right before the cutoff going into postseason, you could tell that meant the world for her. And her mom was just talking about how going into this season, she wasn't sure what she was going to expect. And being able to almost have like new life breathed into her to be able to fall in love with the game again. I thought it was um, so incredible to see that for her. And just know that's the pitcher that you have on your staff who is just tough as nails. And then you have Kilfoyle, who is their ace, who is incredible. Again, a tough team. And LJ and Will Butler, you guys are talking about their offense. Will says Carly Godwin had herself a weekend. How about that for a podcast alum? She came on last weekend and we got to talk about Bedlam and just we talked about how in those moments there's some athletes who love that, who thrive on that. They get big and they say, bring it on. This is my favorite part of the game. Carly definitely had that on her. She looked comfortable, she looked confident, and she drove in so many runs this weekend. It was insane. You could tell every time she stepped into the box, I don't want to say tightness, but there was a little bit more focus. There was a little bit more intensity. She cannot get on base because whenever she does, Oklahoma State tends to score. And that was kind of Oklahoma's mindset whenever she stepped into the box. She killed it, crushed it. Definitely should be considered for freshman of the year. I mean, she just played like a veteran. Another freshman that played like a veteran was Cassidy Pickering. Um, as we continue throughout the rest of the conference going into tomorrow. Tomorrow is the first game, and this one is almost like a buy-in game. So there's two games that will be played tomorrow. That will be U of H versus Kansas at 5 p.m. Central Time, and then Iowa State versus Texas Tech at 7:30. These are the buy-in games. So the winner of these two games will go and play late Thursday night. So Thursday after those games, those are the only two in the evening. Thursday, it starts bright and early. It starts at 11 a.m. It's BYU versus Oklahoma State. Oh, Ivy. It was so nice to meet you, Ivy. I don't know if that's Ivy or her mom. Um, but I hope it's you. I don't know if it's your mom or not, but the main thing that she was battling was an injury to her rib. Kind of had to take some medication to be able to just be able to get in the game and be able to stay consistent and stay through it. Um, her team definitely had her back. Coaches definitely had her back. I think there's something to be said whenever you see somebody just going out there and I give you a little heart. um, but whenever you're going out there and your teammates know that you're injured and you are just going out and you're giving it your all, giving it whatever it is you have left in the tank. I don't know about anybody else, but whenever you see that, it makes me want to go, I'm going to run through a brick wall for you. I'm going to be able to just go to the next level. Being able to just find it within yourself to go, I see what my teammate's doing. I don't want to let her down. I want to be able to have her back. And you could see that. I mean, the run production from Oklahoma State this weekend was just unreal. Unreal. And you were sitting in my seat at Oklahoma State versus OU. You said, "Excuse me, sir. I think you have my seat." I was so polite. Yeah, I was like, "Wait, is this my ticket? Is this not my ticket? I'm not really sure." um, I mean, to be fair, I was kind of walking around anyways, all over the place. So, yeah. Thanks for giving me my seat back, Will. Um, okay, going into the conference tournament. So talked about Wednesday's game going into Thursday. BYU plays Oklahoma State at 11 a.m. That one, I know it's early, but if you can record it, if you can just kind of have it on the phone, just kind of like off to the side, watching at work, I would highly recommend you do so because that one I think is going to be a fun one. Oklahoma is going to play the winner of U of H and Kansas at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. And then Texas at 5 o'clock that evening on Thursday is going to play the winner of Iowa State and Texas Tech. And then the last game of the evening at 7:30, talk about prime time, talk about a matchup that I am dying to see, is UCF versus Baylor at 7:30. And whenever we were just going through the list talking about the teams in the conference and who they are, um, talked about, I think it was somebody said a dark horse team playing well at the right time. BYU has beaten Oklahoma State already. They have beaten OU. There's been a lot of upsets that BYU has like stolen a game here, stolen a game there. They've gotten swept. They've had their fair share of being swept, but they've stolen a game. So BYU is going to be really good, but UCF, I vividly remember watching their series against multiple teams and going, man, like they have the pitching, they have the defense, their offense is on and it's not. Whenever it's on, it's good, but they consistently battle alongside their teams. And we talked about Baylor getting a 1-8 start to conference, but which is tough. But a lot of those games were within one run. So you had I believe they got swept at Oklahoma State whenever they played Oklahoma State. They got swept, but those games were all within one run. They were tight games, they were low scoring games, they were competitive games. These two teams have been right on the cusp. They've been teetering and tottering. UCF, they're hungry. They want to prove themselves, not just now that they're in the Big 12, their first Big 12 conference tournament, but they also have in the back of their head, okay, we got postseason coming up. We want to put ourselves in a good spot. If we do well in this conference tournament, that could move us around a little bit whenever Selection Sunday comes up. And if you're Baylor, you've been on a tear. You have been winning and just absolutely dominating these last few series. You want to carry that momentum. Everything's clicking. Everything's going right for you. Continue to keep it going. Let's see a couple more comments. I think David Franklin said, I just got here. Is this just a Big 12 discussion? Yes. So this is the Big 12 podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Mendes. I host a podcast called 10 Teams, 2 Rings, and I talk about everything Big 12. Now, David, I don't know if you're a Big 12 fan or not, but I am, and I think they're one of the best teams. I think they're one of the best conferences in the nation. They have 3 teams in the top 4, but also I've been saying it all season, all podcast long so far. There's teams that aren't ranked that are going to do some damage, whatever regional they get sent to, because they're just that good, because they're that competitive, because they've been playing against elite teams. No, somebody asked, are you going to call any games this weekend? I was this close to calling some games, but I'm going to get to be doing some really cool things with the Big 12 this week that I will talk about towards the end of the podcast. But just know that I'm going to be on site for the Big 12 tournament. I'm going to be all over the place. It's going to be fun. And then LJ, you said, how about Allen from Iowa State? She's been amazing, impressive performance by Ivy at Bedlam. I agree. Angie Allen, like, wow. Her numbers that she's put up. I was trying to put together last week I put together an offense, and I believe I had her batting leadoff. I'm going back to the offense that I put together for the Big 12. So if you go back and look at last week's episode, I put together a batting order. If I had to pick anybody in the Big 12, who would I pick? I had Angelina Allen batting 1 for Iowa State, Tiara Jennings batting 2 for Oklahoma, Reese Atwood batting 3 for UT, Shaylin Govan batting 4 for Baylor, Jada Coleman batting 5 for OU, Ilana Agbayani from BYU batting 6, Ashton Maloney batting 7 for Texas, Ariana Villa batting 8 for Tech, and then Carly Godwin batting 9 for Oklahoma State. So good. So I did the offense and then I was like, man, defense. Could I put together a defense? And I think I could put together a pretty solid defense with that lineup. But yeah, I agree. These Big 12 teams are so tough this weekend. Um, just watching, just watching what's coming up. No Mia Scott in top 2 batting order. Yeah, I know. It was tough. It was tough. It was a battle. I mean, I don't know how I keep Cassie Pickering off of the board for that offense as well. I mean, you could have a couple more from Iowa State. It was hard. There was only 9. When I tell you guys, it took me about 15, 20 minutes just to make that lineup because I couldn't figure out who to put in, who to take out. It was tough. David Franklin says, watch out for Duke and Clemson and Florida State if Reed is healthy. Sleeper is Virginia Tech. I agree. I think maybe, I mean, we'll see because I don't make all this stuff for Softball America, but I think it would be pretty cool if we had for Softball America just some sleeper teams that we think won't be ranked very high, but not even not even like overlooked, but they're just not ranked very high. Whenever they get sent somewhere, they're gonna be just absolute, like you said, sleepers. Um Gray, the producer, he said, my SEC team. So whenever I was making the Big 12 lineups, Gray was like, you know what? This is a great little practice. Let me make an SEC lineup. And he's over here in the private chat. You guys are talking in public chat. He's in the private chat and he's saying, my SEC, he's talking about trash. I think my Big 12 lineup would beat his SEC lineup. I'm a little biased, but I think my lineup would beat his. So there's that. And I have the mic and Gray's not on the screen. So I get the last word. So there we go. Um I so I tried making a list of who I think is going to be the most impactful players from each team, from all these teams in the conference going into the tournament because it's great how good they have done all conference long. Like I love it. It is definitely talk about iron sharpens iron. These teams have gotten so much better as season goes on just because they learn how to play together, but also because they've been playing really, really, really tough teams, tough battles. And so with that, being able to figure out like how does this fall into play? How does this fall into order? It has been tough trying to figure out okay, who goes where, who's going to be this playmaker, who's going to be this difference maker. But whenever you go into the tournament, it's almost like what we talked about with Bedlam. It's very much a who loves this moment, who loves getting big in those big time moments, who shrinks underneath the pressure. They may be good all season, but once a lot of eyeballs are on them, do they shrink? Do they get big? So um, I think there's going to be some teams that are going to get big and it's going to pay off for them as they go into postseason. LJ, you said the best offense in the NCAA would only get 2 players in a Big 12 lineup. I tried to get a couple of different players because I do think that whenever you fade things out, I think whenever you have team chemistry, that always plays different. Just on stats alone this year, Mia Scott is pretty clear of Jennings, both great players. And again, it's not always for me whenever I was picking out this lineup, it wasn't necessarily just about the stats. Now, do I look at them? Absolutely. But it's also what kind of style do they play with? What's their emotion? What's their mindset whenever they're up in the box? Because as a player, whenever I had Shay Knighton batting in front of me, I thought differently. I competed differently. I felt differently. And then I would be in the 9 hole, and then Jocelyn Allen would be in the 1, you know? And so whenever you have those types of athletes around you, It makes you think and act differently. And so maybe it might, to me in my head, it wasn't just all about what are these girls doing on numbers individually. But if I had to make a dream lineup, a dream team, it can't all be about stats because there's something to be said about the intangible of those players that just get it, that like get big. And I think that would be a really fun lineup to put to the test in a real life game. Um, not to discredit any of the teams, any of the players that were left off. I think they're all great, but there was only 9 spots and I did struggle for about 20 minutes. So I am not perfect, but this was more than just a stat line. Okay, who has the best stat? They go in 1. Who has the most power? They go in 4. Yes, that plays into a factor, but I think also these players, these athletes that I picked have like that mental mindset. I'm really curious. Um I would love to hear what your lineups would be if you could pick a Big 12 lineup. Who would you put on it and where? What order? That kind of thing. But scouting reports for this weekend going into the conference tournament for the Big 12. So U of H and Kansas, they're playing each other. For me, I think that the biggest thing is going to be pitching. U of H, they have big time offense. They struggle with consistency with their pitching. Kansas, if their pitching isn't on, their offense is sometimes powerful, but not powerful enough that they could just get away with scoring a ton of runs. So for them, I think this game specifically, it's going to be all about the pitching. Who can be the most consistent? Who can be the most on? Iowa State and Texas Tech. I think the roles are flipped a little bit more reversed. I think it's going to be more offense and defensive focus. If your defense isn't solid, then not to say that there's going to be hits left and right, but if your defense is able to be super strong and super consistent, minimize base runners on the base path, you're going to get the advantage over the other. And both of these teams, they need to figure out their offense, their swings. Whenever they do that, that's typically whenever, I mean, now I just sound silly. Whenever you score more runs, that's whenever you win, obviously. But for them too, especially whenever they're able to zone in and lock in a little bit more on their offense, that's typically when I see their game plan start to, okay, this is what we're going after. This is not what we're hunting. Whenever I see that specifically, the game plan being activated in game, that's when I know that they're locked in. A lot of times you'll see them free swinging so far this year. Um, Mia gets sidelined in a lot of awards because she quite glows about her work, like Janae for Texas, until she was recognized broadly when we went to the Women's College World Series her senior year. Big 12 has a lot of great players. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Mia Scott. I love the way that she kind of has, I don't say like a chip on her shoulder, but just a little bit of whenever she plays. To me, Tiari Jennings, not only has she been great, she's been consistently great. And I have found that she's been in these big time moments where she's come through clutch a lot. That's why I picked her in the 2 spot. All right, moving on. We have BYU versus OSU at 11 a.m. on Thursday. The key to this game is going to be, I think, because Oklahoma State is great at closing, but for both of these teams, it's who's going to get out on top, not just inning 1, 2, but inning, if you could be out on top early, innings 1 through 4, and just have a presence. I think that is going to be the team that really determines it. So it's going to be a little bit more about energy. Obviously, of course, you want pitching on point, you want offense on point, but it's an 11 a.m. game. That's pretty early. You're going to be having a lot of teams who are traveling. So you want to be able to bring the energy, bring the momentum. You don't want to fall flat in an early morning game. That's probably one of your biggest adversaries going in and playing that early. Oklahoma versus either U of H or Kansas. Can't really speak on that one just yet. And then Texas, same thing with Iowa State and Texas Tech. Not really sure who they're going to play, so can't quite give a scouting report on that. Best believe I will on my social medias, though, so make sure to follow me because I'll be talking about it all week long. And then UCF versus Baylor at 7:30 Thursday night. Scouting report for this one, I think is going to be action calls. So hit and runs, bunts, steals, squeezes. Give me all the chaos, give me all the action calls because you want the other team, their defense to feel you. You want to feel that presence. And I saw a lot of it from both of those teams early on, early on in the season, and it's kind of, I don't wanna say dwindled away, but I just haven't seen it quite as much. Whenever they use it, both teams have a lot of speed. Whenever they use those action calls, typically they're pretty successful with it. So I think for them, just being aggressive, having those action calls, forcing the other team to make plays. That's my scouting report of what each team should do. Um, so a little bit about me as before we wrap up and head into game day tomorrow. So Big 12 reached out to me earlier this year and said, "Hey, would you be interested in covering the Big 12 conference tournament?" And I said, let me think about it. Absolutely. So all this week, I am going to be on site working with Big 12. I'm going to get interviews. I'm going to be able to get a behind the scenes look. I'm doing a lot of analysis. So if you see a play on Twitter or something that you really, really love, or you want to know what the heck were they doing, tag me in it. I will green screen it. I'll make a video explaining, breaking it down, my own thoughts on it. I'll be on the lookout for some of those as well. We're going to be doing some fan interviews. So if you are at the game, let me know so I can come up and say hi, maybe even get an interviews with the players' parents, all of that, everything in between, all that and above, but also just breaking down at the end of each day. I'm going to have a video just talking about what I saw today, who looks good, who didn't, who's moving on, should they do, what does tomorrow look like. I really am so excited for this conference tournament because I just think that this matchup that has been building all year long of these teams playing each other, having tight games, having competitive games, is going to come to a final crescendo as we enter into the last week before postseason starts on Sunday and selection show goes underway. But all of that, I will give more of my thoughts on postseason later on this week. But I am your host, Nicole Mendes, for 10 Teams, 2 Rings for the Big 12 Network on the Softball America Podcast Networks. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Any more last minute comments before I head out? Jennings, 50 sets, hits on the season to 59 for me, Scott. I mean, both of them, they're pretty good. But last and final thought that I will leave you guys with before I head out, I think that this year has been all about upsets. It has been all about the playing field of softball leveling out. OU not as dominant as they once were, but even the teams that you typically go, "Oh yeah, they're in the top, they're pretty consistent." You're not seeing that quite as much. And I think this postseason is going to reflect that heavily, not just in how the regionals are set up, but how the teams that are going to be coming out of the regionals, who those teams are going to be. I think there's going to be several upsets. I go with Big 12 a lot. I think we might see the most Big 12's teams that we've seen probably in about 5 or 6 years. So I'm excited to see how this levels out whenever it's in those do or die situations this week. I'm excited to see what Sunday has to come. But again, make sure you follow me on social media. I'm going to be talking and updating you guys at the Big 12 tournament every step of the way, every single day. Lots and lots of content. So I can't wait to talk to you guys then. But until then, see you guys.